to Greenfield's Green Dollars. My name is Rachel Cochran. I'm a Water Quality Associate for Paulding, Defiance, and Van Wert counties.
And I'm Clint Schroeder, the Program Manager for Ohio Farm Business Analysis and Benchmarking Program.
And this is Season 2 of Greenfield's Green Dollars, Episode 1.
Yep.
And today we're going to talk a little bit more about cover crops.
Yeah, so last year, Episodes 1 and 2 for our Season 1 focused on the cost to grow cover crops and then also some of the benefits. But now that we have more data out there, we were able to collect some more data, and we really want to update those data sets and talk a little bit about the economic impact of cover crops now that we have a little bit more data to share.
Yep, and obviously we covered this pretty in-depth in Season 1, Episodes 1 and 2. So if you're interested in those benefits and that older data, go check that out. But just a quick rehash of why we use cover crops. So there's a whole slew of benefits on the agronomic side and the environmental side. The first one for the environmental side, being a water quality associate, is cover crops are going to build our soil carbon and our soil organic matter.
Yep.
And that's going to lead to easier and faster infiltration, better aggregate stability, and even with covering the soil surface, erosion control.
Yeah. And I think the other factor that we talked a little bit about is, some of those aspects and how they affect the nutrients that we place on those fields. So.
Yep, so they're able to pull them up, store them, and return them back. And our legumes actually provide nutrients, nitrogen, to our crop. We also have some ability to compete with weeds. So overall, they can do a lot of good in our fields if we're using them in the right way and it makes sense in the economic side of things.
Yeah, and so with that being said, we do have the agronomic benefits, but we know for sure that cover crops come with a cost. And so looking at 5 years worth of data within the FinBin data set, we know that, I just kind of picked out soybeans grown after a cover crop. That cover crop is going to cost right around $45.17 for everything, to whether it's seed, the cost to establishment, and if we want to use mechanical termination, all of those factored in there, we're looking right around $45 an acre is what that cost is to grow the cover crops. Now again, that's over a 5-year period. I'm going to tease a little bit of the data that comes ahead to show that maybe we're potentially getting that number down a little bit in more recent years. So
awesome. Well, if we can entice growers to use those cover crops a little bit more, that'd be great. Well, for some of our new data, this year you have Ohio data, correct?
Yeah, so last year we talked a lot about data that came from Illinois, their precision conservation management. We also talked about the southern Minnesota cover crop cohort that's stored in the FinBin database. But we do now have some Ohio data that we didn't have at this time last year. We're all, always looking to expand that, get more data points, more growers interested in my program, that we can start to then take this and kind of build a more robust set of Ohio data.
So in building that Ohio data, what do you need from a farmer who might want to be involved in that?
Yeah, so our program really looks at everything finances and then how that affects the field level enterprise and what those costs are. And so I think it's important with all of the data sets that we talk about is we're not asking a farmer to change what they're doing. We just want to be able to document what they are doing on the farm. And so whatever their practices are, whatever they're doing, we're just trying to document that and then pool that data together so that we can compare like practices. So really no experimental side on the farm as far as changing practices, more just documenting what they're already doing.
Right, so it's not any kind of research trial, it's just showing what they have done.
Yes, yep, correct.
Cool. So should we dive into some of that data?
Yeah, so I think last year we talked a little bit about cover crops ahead of soybeans was maybe a little bit easier or a little bit less challenging than corn. Mm-hmm. And so we talked about the different data sets, just real quick recapping kind of that Illinois precision conservation management. And so we added another year of data. So from 2015 to 2024 is kind of what that data set is. And you can see that they've got a large portion of fields that had no cover crops, 5,344, compared to overwintering cover crops at 1,769 fields, and then winter terminal species at 63 fields. But really, there wasn't much change. Yields, I think were exactly the same as far as bushels per acre. There was a slight advantage on the winter terminal, about a bushel an acre over the no cover crop, where the overwintering was about 2 bushels per acre lower soybean yields compared to the no cover crop. And so when you kind of work through all of that data, the no cover crop was about $46 more profitable than the overwintering, but the winter terminal was about $2 more profitable than no covers. So that, really from year to year, the Illinois data stayed pretty same just by adding that additional year. Kind of confirms what they've seen in Illinois for the past several years.
Okay.
So then if we flip to Minnesota, Minnesota is a little bit interesting for a number of factors. Just how short their growing season can certainly make it a challenge for covers, and they don't quite have the yield potential because of that shorter growing season. So we saw a little bit tighter spread in 2024, between the no covers for the southern Minnesota average, and then they have this cover crop cohort. So in this, they have 63 farms that had no covers, and then 34 grown after covers. And those are really in the same geographic area. In some cases, the same farm might have a field that has cover crops on, and they might have another field of soybeans that doesn't. And so those would fall, they'd have one in each category. So sometimes the same farmer, same tight geographic area. And so what we saw there was really not much of an advantage, about 2 bushels to the acre to the no covers group compared to the grown after covers. But what we did see is that cover crop revenue. So they had $29.70 of revenue associated with that cover crop. So that could have been maybe a carbon payment or a government incentive of some sort that came for growing that cover crop. And so that really helped kind of cover that burden of what that cost was. And so in the end, they had kind of a poor growing season in 2024. All of the different categories here lost money. Our southern Minnesota average lost $46 an acre. But when we looked at that cover crop cohort, the cover crops were actually $7, or they had lost $7 less than the no cover group. So at $75 compared to $82.
So both situations, they did lose money. The cover crop was just not as much.
Right, yeah, and that really kind of ties back into just kind of some of the tough commodity markets we've had over the last couple years here, and projecting those going forward potentially. Mm-hmm. I think that was a large portion, and then also I think their growing season, the weather didn't cooperate towards the end. I think they were dry last year towards the end of the grain fill period, and so I think that impacted or maybe took the top end off some of the yields there.
Right.
And then, as we shift our focus to Ohio, so again, this is relatively new. I have 2 years of data included. It is still a pretty small sample size, but we're looking at a group of no covers versus grown after covers. And so we had over 8,000 acres that are documented with no covers, and right around 2,400 that are grown after covers. And so looking at that, we actually saw a yield increase on our cover crop acres. So, growing soybeans after a cover crop, we had 61.94 bushels to the acre versus 58.98. So, about a 3 bushel to the acre advantage. And really that ended up taking us down to $88 an acre, almost $89 an acre more profitable. And so on this one, I'm kind of looking at a return to operator and land. So if I'm going to pay my land rent and pay myself, this is the money that's left. And so $267 for those farms that didn't go covers versus $356 for those that did. And I think a lot of that, again, tied to about $27.70 of revenue associated with the cover crop. Mm-hmm. So potentially an H2 Ohio payment for some farms. Maybe they're involved in a carbon market or whatever. So we do see that benefit, and that really kind of offsets some of those direct costs for the growing the cover crops. Was right around $25. So Ohio, we had our seed costs pretty low at $14.78. That is what the seed cost was for growing that acre of cover crops. And so, quite a bit less than what we've seen maybe nationally. But again, I think as we're getting more research, we're getting more comfortable with those seeding rates or figuring out what species we want to grow that are going to be economical.
So can you share with us any info about the farms that provided this info to you? Are they kind of all over the board on size? Where are they located?
Yeah, so the bulk of these tend to be in the Northwest, a little bit on the western side of the state. We really can't give out too much data because our participants are anonymous. But as I get more data in, then that's where I can start to look at sorting them by farm size or other factors that come into play there. So that's why we really need more Ohio participants to help us then be able to sort that down to specific counties, locations, farm size, and some other factors that might come into play there.
Okay. Well, I mean, that makes sense. We have the majority of our ag land in Ohio is in that western northwest area, so that kind of tracks, but hopefully we can spread that out.
And that's where I think we definitely see the most push to use cover crops because of the Western Lake Erie Basin, the H2 Ohio program, and so I think that's where maybe a lot of those questions are: is how can I effectively put that into my program, utilizing those cover crops.
Yep. All right, so transitioning, those were all prior to soybeans, right? So now, do you have any data for us before corn crop?
Yeah, so similar kind of story as we look out to Illinois first and the precision conservation management. About a 8 bushel to the acre spread between the different groups, the no cover crop being the highest, then the winter terminal, and then the overwintering. So, a little bit of a tight group there at only 8 bushels of difference. We see that spread is still right around $48. It was $48 more profitable for the no cover crop group. And I think this is kind of, again, reinforces, some of the payments and the other factors is we need some sort of external payment factor to kind of cover the cost of those cover crops and keep it on a level playing foot. And that shows up in the Illinois data as we add another year into that data set. If we switch gears and start looking at Minnesota, this one was pretty interesting. This one flipped about 180 from what it was previously. The yield range was very tight. Looking at 181 bushels to the acre was the southern Minnesota average. When we look at our cover crop cohort, 180.81 bushels to the acre for the no cover crops versus 175.93 for grown after covers. So really, a pretty tight window there, only 5 bushels to the acre difference between the two. We did see that increased cover crop revenue. So a lot of the farms that are growing those somehow had some income associated with that cover crop. That went from right around $5 an acre in 2023 up to this $38.87 in 2024. As we think about, our seeding costs, around $18.86 was our seed cost for that cover crop. And so, we combine that all together, and really the total cost to grow the cover crops was right around $39 an acre. So again, coming in right around that $40 mark that we've traditionally seen. But, thanks to that increased revenue and some other areas where maybe they were able to lower costs, fertilizer and chem were maybe a little bit lower compared to the no cover group. We did see that the grown after covers group was, I guess you could say, most profitable, but they really lost the least amount of dollars, only losing $42.53 an acre compared to the no cover portion that lost $91 an acre. And then the southern Minnesota average was a loss of $111.65 an acre. So pretty substantial difference there, $50 to $70 between the groups that they were, had lost less money per acre.
Right.
And so this is, for Ohio, really our first year having any sort of data associated with cover crops prior to corn. And so still, again, pretty small sample set with 5,771 acres represented being grown with no cover crops versus 659 acres being grown after covers. And so we did see a yield advantage for the cover crop group. So grown after covers was 201.11 bushels per acre versus 188.22. So, right around 13 bushels to the acre advantage for that grown after covers group. Kind of taking again that factor of the cover crop revenue. In this scenario in Ohio, we were able to get about $37.53 an acre in cover crop revenue. So really that's improving that bottom line and kind of making up for the cost. In this situation, it was right around $27 an acre to grow those cover crops. So, the cover crop payment really offset that cost of the seed and the establishment or termination. But in general, when we think again about that return to operator and land, we saw our no cover crop group at $75.37 versus 198, so $198.64 to that grown after covers group. So really a pretty big difference there, over $120 different for those farms had that advantage when they were growing their corn after a cover crop in 2020-24.
Right, so between the increased yield and maybe that cost share payment, it looks like the cover crops are coming out ahead here in Ohio.
Yeah, so this is again just 1 year of data and a relatively small sample size. So something that we really want to continue to look at and increase to try and get a better gauge on that, how it plays out over time. And so, right now, the numbers look promising and share a good story. But, it wasn't that long ago that we did see a lot of negative numbers in other states. And so I don't know how that will track, from year to year within Ohio as we continue to research that.
Right. So we need to grow that sample size. If you're a producer who uses cover crops and you're interested in contributing to this data set, all you got to do is reach out to Clint, right?
Yeah, that would be great. Get in touch with me and we can, kind of walk you through the process and what would be involved and see if it's a good fit for your operation. But I think, this is some research I'm doing, but I know, you and your team and other researchers at Ohio State are also looking at some different factors that might affect cover crops and their implementation.
Yeah, so cover crops they're very intricate, right? So there's a lot of factors that go into managing them. If we're participating in a cost share program, a lot of times that seeding rate is going to be dictated as well as planting date. But if we are either not eligible for a cost share program or we don't want the hassle of enrolling in something like that, we are doing research here to say, okay, what seeding rate is the most optimum to reduce our seed costs but still get the same percent ground cover?
Yep.
And what seeding dates are kind of the cutoff where we can see good growth through the winter and into the spring. So we have both on-farm research and then trials here out at the research farms looking at both seeding rate, planting date, and even some variety species studies as well. So Steph Karhoff is doing a lot of work on that, especially here at the research stations and with Elizabeth Hawkins. And then some of us out in the counties are doing the same thing. So we're partnering with local growers to check their seeding rates and planting dates with different seeding methods, whether it's aerial, drilled, broadcast, whatever they're already doing. So there's stuff on the horizon. There will be results published in the next probably year or two about that kind of stuff.
And I think another one that's pretty interesting is I know our wheat science is looking at, the effects of that biomass of the cover crop and maybe some weed suppression.
Yep.
So that's out there. I know we're also looking a little bit about, termination method and timing and how that maybe impacts cash crop following it. So I think there's some interesting things that we're trying to piece together. And, maybe a spoiler alert, we hope to share some of that data as it comes along with our viewers.
Yeah, of course.
And so, yeah, I mean, obviously extensions is a resource, but also NRCS, maybe your local soil and water would have some more information as well.
Exactly. So I think that's all we have for cover crops today, but our next episode is actually going to be focusing on drainage.
Yeah, so I think that one's a really crucial component because if you don't have, poorly drained soils, you're going to have kind of maybe some issues that arise from that. So I think we're going to look at, you know, kind of what are those factors when we have properly drained, what's maybe a yield benefit and some of the other agronomic benefits to having, you know, good drainage on our farms.
Yep, so stay tuned for that, and we will be joined by Bruce Clevenger, and he is going to share the golden rule of drainage.
Yep, we'll see you next time.